certain terms in data protection, and we used to talk about privacy by design. And the very primary idea behind privacy by design, especially for developers, is that at the very beginning and every time you are writing a line of code, especially where it intersects with the personal information of individuals, you have at the back of your mind that there is a law or there is a regulation that says, oh, this is what can be done with personal information of persons, or this is what cannot be done. Right? So when we say, the concept of privacy by design, especially for developers, is to say, every time we have to use personal information of persons, this is what we need to do. This is the consciousness that we need to have. We can't use their information without them agreeing to it. I mean, at the very basics. Next. Next. So, enhanced security. We talk about implementing data protection measures to reduce the risk of data breaches. And the impact of data breaches just doesn't end at that. But before we go to that, what do we mean by data breach? Is there anybody in the room that has any idea what data breach is? Why always you? Data breach. Do you want to tell us something about data breach? Data breach. Just to say, anyhow you know it.
Well, basically, it's more of a going against the two sets of rules.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yes, that is breach. That is breach. Data breach means that for some reasons, for some weird reasons. Oh, somebody's hand? Oh, sorry. I missed that.
Data breach is like an incident where sensitive information about the user is stolen or accessed unlawfully.
Fantastic. Fantastic stuff. Please, a round of applause for him, please. So thank you. So data breach essentially means, for some weird reasons, whether intentionally or by mistake, a piece of information falls into the wrong hands. And then what happens from there? Different things can happen. It could jeopardize the very framework of an organization, and that might mean that their business is gone for life. It could also mean that where personal information of individuals are involved, it goes and then it falls into the wrong hand. How many of us have ever heard of Soko loans? Soko loans, they are nowhere to be found now. Probably that's why we don't know. Okay, it's okay if we don't know Soko loans. But Soko loans used to be a loan app that was collecting personal information of individuals, and FCCPC again, and NITDA, as at then, found them guilty and fined them 10 million naira, if I'm correct. And ever since then, nobody heard anything from them again. So it was a data breach that happened, or a continuous reported or unreported data breach that was happening in that system, where they were floating out personal information of individuals. So the idea behind this is that as upcoming developers, we have the consciousness that there is a possibility that in writing that code, we need to plug some gaps that would ensure that our organization at the end of the day doesn't find their data in the dark web or in the dark net. And then the source of our livelihood is gone. Because by the time the regulator comes and then finds your startup 10 million naira, what is left? What is left? Nothing. Next. Again, like I said earlier, we have the NDPA, which is the NDPA 2023, and essentially it's a book of law, but in practical terms, that's what we are discussing here, so don't worry yourself too much about it. Next. Then, like I said, customer trust. In some part of the world, as at today, you need to be telling people as an organization at the get-go, at the very much at your gates. You need to be telling them our privacy policies are available at XYZ place for you to go and access it. Before people want to give you their personal information now for you to do any business, because they know you will sell their data. They want to see what you exactly will do with their data, right? So the idea behind data protection is also, okay, in us wanting to sell our business, we have to front that we are conscious of how we use your data. That is the same thing ESG does, you know? People say, oh, we are an environmentally conscious organization. How many of us have seen that kind of term before? Somewhere. All right. We should have. In order to ensure long-term success of organizations, it is essential that data protection is at the very core of what they do. Next. Then there is fine. If you look at the fine print, in Nigeria, as at today, if an organization is found guilty of a data breach or some sort of infringement on the use of personal information, they could be fined up to the sum of 10 million naira, like I mentioned earlier, or 2 million naira, or based on some technicalities, right? Next. And then it gives you competitive advantage as a software developer. I said earlier that my co-founder, he literally bored the interviewer by saying, oh, he knew something about data protection, and then he just mentioned some technical jargon, and he went through, you know. So it boosts your portfolio as a software developer to say, I know one or two things about data protection. So you should put that in your consciousness, right? Next. Then what is data protection? So data protection essentially involves safeguarding personal data. And the idea behind safeguarding personal data is to prevent unauthorized access. We've said that earlier. We said essentially data breach is unauthorized access to personal information. Be moving at my pace, huh? Thank you. So what are the types of data to protect? There are two types of data as per the Nigerian regulation today. There are two types of personal data that is recognized in Nigeria. We have what is known as personal data, and we have what is known as sensitive personal data. Don't worry yourself about it too much. But the idea behind sensitive personal data is that certain data could fall into the wrong hands, and they could have very grievous impact on the individual. They could destroy the individual's life, right? So imagine that somebody's health record somehow slips into the room, and then the person is HIV positive, hepatitis B positive, God forbid, right? Immediately that information flows into this room, you see everybody standing up from the person's side and going to go and sit in another place. That is a sensitive personal data. So in an organization, if you as a software developer has written the code and for some reasons there's an issue with your code and somebody was able to break into it and they stole that information and you destroy that individual's life or you destroy their source of livelihood, you know? So that's sensitive data, and that's essentially the difference between personal data and sensitive data. So it's for the sake of time, it is classified based on the level of impact it could have on the individual should it fall in the wrong hands. So what are common threats to data? Next. We have phishing, we have malware, we have ransomware, we have insider threats. We have some cybersecurity experts in the room, right? I know this is not very technical terms, but let's go. So phishing essentially is some sort of caricature emails that tricks you into submitting your personal information. And most times this set of information are done to just jeopardize the framework of an organization, maybe just to cause some problem in the security program. Next. Then we have malwares, gotten from malice, yeah? Malicious software designed to disrupt, damage, or gain unauthorized systems, access to systems. There was a time Twitter was a victim of a malicious attack. And it was a staff who had clicked the wrong link on a device that was official. You know about it. Oh, fantastic stuff. And that actually disrupted Twitter's operation worldwide in that period. So even as a member of the organization, even not just as a software developer now, what is happening is sometimes you get some very funny emails. And even as individuals, you will have seen these emails maybe, instead of them to write GT Bank, they probably, instead of the A, they put alpha there. Have you seen anything like that before? It's going to look almost like it, but something will be missing. Instead of a I, it will be L. Instead of O, it could be something with O, like a Yoruba. It has that dot underneath. What is happening is they want to trick you to give them your personal data so that they can do some magic with it. They could hurt you. They could access your money from doing that. So that is ransomware. So when they get into your personal computer, then they say, and then they call you. They could call you and say, you need to send us 10 Bitcoin before we allow you to access your computer, or you lose all the data on it. Have you ever seen that in the movie before? Yes, that's a ransomware. Next, then insider threat. That is misappropriation of data by members of staff. Like when you open information to somebody in HR that's not supposed to have access to it, or somebody in finance that's not supposed to have access to the information at HR, right? So that's insider threat. Then the theoretical part of it, which is the NDPA 2023. NDPA 2023 is the act that put Nigeria in the control technical space for conversation around data protection. So let me give us the business implication of this. Go back to the first slide. Let me give us the business implication of this. What would have happened if Nigeria did not have what is currently written on the board? Would have been that we would be forced, even as software developers now, to learn a European law, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. Personally, I learned it, and it was painful because I had to learn the history of Europe, which was none of my business. I don't care. Which I had to learn the history of Europe and how they come about, everything that they come about as a group of countries, right? So it was NITDA. You must have heard about NITDA before. We're tech people, yeah? It was NITDA. Then now we have what is known as Nigeria Data Protection Commission. And they are the body that speaks to data protection. So should somebody collect your data and misuse it, you can actually write an email to Nigeria Data Protection Commission and report to the organization. How many of us are aware of that? Oh, there you go. So if MTN or some random company keep bombarding you with emails and something that is none of your business, you can write to them. Tell them that under the Nigeria Data Protection Act, it is against your right for them to continue to email you. Don't worry, you will see the kind of response you get from them. Watch it. All right, so let's go. So essentially, there are three arms, or there are three basic things that the Nigeria Data Protection Act speaks on. It speaks on privacy rights, it speaks on breach notification, and data processing rules. Now, again, this is about us developing a certain type of consciousness. So should a breach happen within an organization, the law now spells out what should happen. The law now spells out a time frame for reporting data breaches. And then privacy rights. For the first time in the history of Nigeria, a private sector, in conjunction with the Nigeria Constitution, spells out certain rights outside of what we just know. And they say, oh, when you give your information to Devfest, Devfest cannot do X with your personal information. Devfest cannot collect your information without informing you and share it with Devfest Casino. It's wrong. It's wrong. So what the right says, what data privacy rights in Nigeria says is that every time an information is collected, for instance, it must be within the confines of the purpose of collecting it. So as a software developer, your founder then meets you and says, you see, this information that we're collecting, right? You need to write the code in such a way that we can also use it to sell X. My co-founder is laughing. We can also use it to sell something else. It's wrong. So you as a software developer, you should be able to say, sir, or honorable ma'am, the law prevents us from going ahead with this because whatever reason why we're collecting information, we must stick to it. So if I tell you that I'm collecting this information to provide you collecting your personal information to provide you information about Devfest Ilorin, it must stop at that point. If I ever want to use the information, if I want to send the information to Uni Ilorin now, or I want to send the information to Uni Oshun, I should write an email to you and say, thank you, Shalom, for the information you gave us that we use for Devfest Ilorin. Now, I would like to use your information for Devfest Osun State. Or I would like to give you information Devfest Osun. And I should say yes before you go ahead and share my personal information. Thank you. Then there are data processing rules. So it says that for every point in the life cycle of personal information, you must put into consideration data protection practice to the point where you eventually delete personal information. You must be conscious of what you do with personal information and how you handle personal information. So your entire CI/CD pipeline, your entire DevOps must have the consciousness of, we are using personal information of individuals and we need to be very careful. You don't just subject personal information of persons to test environments without maybe informing them, right? Because anything can happen. Yeah, anything can happen. For developers and onboarding and boarding developers, you should practice secure coding techniques. You need to use input validation, output encoding, and avoid common vulnerabilities to SQL injection. Then you also need to adopt what's known as data encryption. And then you should apply what is known as role-based access control. How many of us have ever heard that term before? Role-based access control, RBAC. Wow, fantastic stuff. So the idea behind it is that should we have 10 people in this room and then you all belong to different departments? So as developers, it's very important for you to know this. Should we have 10? We have 100 persons in this room that belong to 10 departments. It means that in interacting with personal information of individuals, you don't need all the information. So we shouldn't make all the information available to 100 individuals. If you will only need to interact with the names of individuals, then only the name should be made available to you. Don't worry, as time goes on, you'll probably catch on how that works. Right? Next slide. I think that should be the last one. Yeah. And then you also need to do security testing, penetration testing, vulnerability scanning. We should have had that before. Then third party, you need to also check for third party safety with third party libraries that you adopt. Then, as an organization, you should also have incident response planning. Personally, I'll say I've made a lot of money from helping organizations prepare for responding to data breaches and putting plans in place for responding to incidents. Next. All right. So common tools for you as a developer. Somebody said something when we got to say YouTube is your friend. You said that, right? YouTube is your friend. Trust me. YouTube is your friend. And I say this without any fear. having studied in and outside of Nigeria, YouTube is one of the best schools that you can attend. The best part is it is free. So you can take any of the terms that I've spoken to you about today. There are tons of material, hours of material discussing and tearing down every bit and aspect of this. So as a developer, you shouldn't just be focused on writing codes. I have a lot of guys at my place. All they just want to write is codes and code. It's not just about code. A lot of things goes into a code or goes into codes and that makes codes usable. Security is one of them, right? And as a developer, communication is one of them. So you know all the things. But my bit is to tell you that security is one of the things that you need to put at the back of your mind every time you're writing the code, no matter how small. If it's a hello word you're writing, you should say, how do we keep this secure? What are the tools? What is in place for us to keep this secure? Yeah. So I also think I've heard somebody talk about sonar cooled earlier when we were speaking earlier. I think he said something. Oh, he didn't. Okay, maybe it was my mind. So you need to ensure that you adopt encryption, like I said, and look out for tools to analyze security vulnerabilities in your code. Like I said, blogs, courses, documentation, workshops like this are very important for you as a budding developer in developing the kind of consciousness that is enough for you to be marketable and make a lot of money from writing codes. Right? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll leave the room for questions. Thank you. Thank you. I think I did a commentary, so I don't think it was published, but I also did a commentary on NDPA 2023. And before the NDPA 2023, we had what was known as the NDPR 2019, and they had an implementation framework, and it also had an implementation framework for public organizations. It was called MPIG, if I'm correct. Essentially, the idea behind that is this is the regulation because essentially it was just lifted from the GDPR. It was lifted from GDPR, and then they had to put out a guideline for the implementation of that. And this is how I will link it to his question. So if you ordinarily Google NDPA 2023 as we speak, it's going to pop up. You're going to see a PDF version of it. And then if you probably scroll down, you will see a lot of organizations have written commentaries on it, comparing it with other regulations around the world. Now, because data protection is still very new, it's still very new. It's a nascent field. I understand what you're saying. There is always a dichotomy between the technical expertise that is available and the theoretical understanding or knowledge of what is obtainable. And the beauty of it is that we're now having individuals from cybersecurity who write code and they have some basic knowledge of data protection coming up. We're sort of finding the Venn diagram where, yes, we're sort of now drawing a Venn diagram where you just don't have lawyers at one end and then technical people at one end, and they're living in different worlds, and then the lawyer comes with all this jargon, and you people cannot achieve anything. At the end of the day, you still put out the same set of code, right? So it's moving. It's a space that you might want to explore. It's a space that people might want to explore in this room. Very interesting space. Yeah. So you might want to be looking out for GRC professionals, InfoSec professionals who maybe know a bit. Yeah, privacy. Thank you, privacy engineers. And then you have people. You have DevOps people who now move into privacy engineering. That kind of now bridges the gap between the theoretical knowledge and what is technically obtainable. Thank you.